Hello and welcome to the Vandy Sports Roundtable podcast. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Billy Derrick and Luke Wyatt. We'll get into the mailbag later in the show. Of course, we will mostly be talking football. The Commodores off to a 2-0 start with a very winnable game at Georgia State ahead on Saturday. Before we get into all that, we remind you basketball season is brought to you by the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things you truly enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off all your dirty laundry. Our professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, and that is your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, and clean laundry ready to be put away. Check out washhouseclean.com. Stop in today and get your time back. Steve Andrews runs that company. He's a good friend of mine, has been for probably 20 years. Wonderful human being. Give you some business to the Wash House and let them know you heard about it at Vandy Sports. Baseball season is presented by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. A partnership began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide Purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. They now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. Today, they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more information, visit their website at mpmci.com. We've had plenty of Mayfield and Purity in this house. And, you know, if I can endorse one thing, it is ice cream. Eat your ice cream. Be happy. And thank the folks at the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company for their sponsorship of this show. Gentlemen.
Yes, you like cookies and cream?
Billy, if it's ice cream, I like it. You don't even have to ask.
Hey, Billy and I were talking. Miss Oreo. Where's Oreo been?
Oreo's out in the backyard doing Oreo things, and that's fine. It's going to rain. We've got one of these screen doors. We've set it with the magnetic thing down the middle.
Yeah.
And so if it starts pouring rain, he can come in through that. The problem is he's freaked out by it. And will not enter unless I stand in the doorway and spread the attachments as far apart as possible. Then he sprints in through the door so it doesn't zap him or whatever. He is the strangest dog I've ever seen. I mean, he's just if you haven't been around Oreo, he defies explanation.
Doing Oreo things. I love it.
Doing Oreo things.
That's awesome.
Anyway, dogs aside, gentlemen, we hadn't had a loss to talk about in like over 3 months. It's been fun times here doing the show lately. I don't think that. Look, let's be real. Clobbering Alcorn State doesn't prove a lot, but you had a chance to take some steps backwards, put some concerns on the table. I mean, Luke, we haven't talked to you since that game. Really, I've got 2 concerns about where Vanderbilt is in football. Other than that, I mean, it's been a pleasant surprise. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. I think one of them is the penalties and the discipline. Some of those have been bad luck, and I think those in time will probably clean up. I think maybe bigger concern might be lack of being able to generate explosive offensive plays. I don't think they had one over 20 yards maybe in the Alcorn State game until the second half. I mean, it didn't really matter, but I mean, I'm liking what I'm seeing from them so far. They had a plan to figure this out, and I think they have executed extremely well so far, Luke.
Well, I thought that what I was concerned about the Alcorn game was us losing our identity, but we didn't. We came out and basically did the same type of drive we did against Virginia Tech. So we kind of, as C.M. Newton used to say, we tended to our knitting. We stayed with who we are. And I felt like, the guys at some point, or even the coaches at some point, might say, look, we can get some quick stuff here. And they did try some deep passes that's kind of out of character. They didn't connect on a couple of them. He underthrew one, and then he overthrew one other. So, but they stayed with their identity, and they just were very workmanlike and businesslike. And that's the encouraging thing. You're correct about the penalties. But I attribute that to playing a whole lot of players. Had a bunch of guys in there. Now the pre-snap penalties, that they got to clean that up for sure, because that'll get you beat in the SEC. So once we get that cleaned up, I feel pretty good about it, Chris. I'm like you. There's not a whole lot to complain about.
Yeah, the only thing for me, Chris, that I looked at that game were the penalties, like y'all talked about. The dropped interceptions keep nagging at me, because I think those are plays that they're going to have to make, and not even that I think they are. I mean, those are catches they're going to have to make. You saw it a couple times against Virginia Tech. DeRicky Wright should have had that one. Dante Carter should have had his against Alcorn State. And again, they haven't cost them games yet, but if that continues to happen, it will. You're late in a game, you're within a score or two, you need a pick, you got to catch it, right? So I know Clark is hammering in on that, and I tried to hammer in on that on the post game, but other than that, that was very workmanlike. I mean, Nate Johnson, that was one. This isn't a concern, but Clark talked about this on Tuesday. He said, "Yeah, Nate, we would have rather gotten him a few more reps there, but you had a punt return touchdown from Hight, you had a pick six there from Taco Wright. Who would have thought that? But so that is maybe a negative there. But at the end of the day, it didn't happen. So if anything, guys, Alcorn State, if they were a little bit better, maybe it helps Vanderbilt a little bit. I talked about this with somebody, guys. That looked like one of the worst teams that I've ever seen come through Vanderbilt Stadium. And the thing is, they looked that bad the week prior too. They had something like 61, passing yards. The stats were similar against a UAB type team. So, and UAB goes and loses the next week. So that's a bad Alcorn team. And so I think going into this week, Chris, you have to realize Georgia State is not Alcorn, right? Georgia State, they've got some athletes. They've got a good coaching staff. Jim Chaney, a lot of people don't remember or don't realize that he's on the staff. He's the OC who's been at Georgia and Tennessee. So I think that Alcorn being sandwiched between Virginia Tech and Georgia State, you can't get too short-sighted on thinking Georgia State is going to be similar to Alcorn State, because it's not.
I'm going to direct this at Luke, and it's more of a thought. Maybe I can articulate it into a question, but I'm always fascinated by the whole "what are you holding back" topic, and sometimes you also put things out there for people to have to prepare for. And I'm really wonder where they are in the balance of that. Again, I think that Cole Spence is a guy that I would have expected to be one of their leading target getters so far. He's had one target in 2 weeks. I don't know how much of that is holding him back for bigger things. I don't know how much. I mean, they should beat Georgia State this weekend. When you're Vanderbilt, you can never take that for granted. But do you hold some things back that you're going to show to SEC opponents? That's coming up next week with Missouri. I'm just kind of fascinated by this whole dynamic of, we got a lot of tricks up our sleeve. We're showing you some, we're holding some back. Luke, where do you think they stand? I mean, I guess the Alcorn State plan was pretty vanilla. They did have a Stowers pass to Spence that they showed. So that one's not a secret now. I'm just curious, in your experience with Vanderbilt football and coaching staffs, how do you approach that whole thing of, all right, let's get some things out there, but let's also hold some things back?
Well, I think, and then again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, because they stayed with what they do. I love that. I think that their approach is, we're not going to show a whole lot. However, just ask Notre Dame. They were very vanilla against Northern Illinois on offense, and it cost them the football game.
Mm-hmm.
So Vanderbilt can't afford to do that against Georgia State, because Georgia State's just very much like a Northern Illinois. They can bite you if you don't play well, and they don't turn the ball over, which is why they lost their first game and didn't play well against Chattanooga. They have some athletes. I was looking. They have 29 transfers. That's a lot. And they have 28 seniors or graduate players. So they're a football team that's played a lot of football, no matter what level. They played a lot of football. So to answer your question, yeah, I don't think they want to show a whole lot. But however, this offense is predicated, basically it's an option football, but you're out of the pistol or you're out of the gun. So, there's not a whole lot of different stuff you can show. I will say this, Chris, I think as the season goes on, you're going to see the tight ends become more and more. It'll leak in more and more.
Yeah.
have to go there. They haven't had to do it yet. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
those
I think,
tight ends.
go ahead, Billy.
Yeah. I was just gonna say those tight ends are weapons. You know, we just, like you said, Luke, we haven't had to see it. And Cole Spence, Chris, all we were talking about felt like a lot of times was Cole Spence. That, you know, he's done so well in fall camp and he's making plays. That's fairly impressive. Now I would guess it's on film now that, you know, teams have shut him down. But at the end of the day, you know, I think going into it, Virginia Tech knew that Vanderbilt might try to go to him. They had double teamed him, like you said, Luke. But yeah, those tight ends, for them to not be very heavily involved so far, Chris, I think is a good thing so far, because, I mean, you know, down the stretch, that's when you will really need them in SEC play.
Yeah, and I want to throw another concern out there, and to me, it's health at corner and availability at corner. That's one development between Tuesday and the last time, or whenever the last time we broadcast, and now is that, and I was a little surprised. Luke, Kolbey Taylor sounds like he's going to be available this week. Sounds like, I don't remember Clark Lee's exact words, but a little patching up of whatever was going on there. I think there were some off-field concern or behavioral concerns, I guess is a good way to put it. Man, you go back and you say, if they just could have had those two FCS corners who are both out for health-related reasons, then I think you're upside on the season. You take it up another notch. Because I'm worried right now, I feel like if they lose Hight or Taylor, there's a big step down to what's next. And I think that's maybe my biggest concern on the defensive side.
No, I agree with that. I think Jalen Lackey has potential, but he's young, obviously, being a freshman. But, yeah, that's my biggest concern on the defensive side, because the safeties and the D-line have shown up and played really well. Now, I was a little concerned that we only got one sack against Alcorn, but they didn't throw it a whole lot. I don't know what it was, 15 to 18 times. That concerned me a little bit, but you didn't have Corday Sidnor. That hurt a little bit. I don't think he's playing this weekend either. But, yeah, you're correct. The corner would be my only concern on defense.
Billy,
Chris,
do you have thoughts here?
Oh, no. I mean, no. Luke kind of hit on that. Kolbey Taylor is needed though on this defense. I mean, you know, you mentioned with the other two corners, if those guys were here, we're not talking about it, but it'll be interesting to see. Do we see him at all? Do we need to see him? You know, Vanderbilt shouldn't. I don't think they should have to play him. But if they do have to play him, then maybe that tells you something about Georgia State and how they're doing in the pass game in Saturday's game. But yeah, that to me, Chris. But guys, the thing to me right now, there aren't many other injury concerns, which tells you about how they've changed everything. I mean, we were taught week after week it was who's hurt. Yeah. Knock on wood, yeah.
But Billy, camp last year, we'd go and there'd be 15 guys on the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and it was a huge issue last year, and so for that to not be an issue, really, Sidnor, you know, he'll be fine, but no one's serious. Knock on wood, and I hate to mention that, but you know, I think that's a big thing so far.
I'm glad you guys brought that up, and this is a small thing, but it's a huge thing. The hydration, which causes cramps, which causes muscle pulls, that's what they're doing a better job at. I can remember Coach Franklin was here. One of the big things he did, and Tom Boston, our head athletic trainer at the time, was always constantly on the guys, where's your jug? And he's talking about their jug that they carry around with Gatorade or electrolytes and water or whatever it may be for the kids. They used to have it tied around their neck and walk around with a half-gallon jug with them. I think that's the most important thing, because, you know, a cramp turns into a muscle pull, then you're out for 2 or 3 weeks, especially if
soft
I mean, that might have cost Virginia Tech the game. Their quarterback couldn't play in overtime because he was cramping up.
Yes.
And it amazes me how that happens. I mean, you would think, hey, it's a hot day, hydrate. You would think that would be something that would never happen in football.
I'll tell you when it happens. It's when the kids finally get in bed and they crash and they don't get up and they sleep because they're tired and they don't hydrate throughout the night. That's the whole thing. That's how it happens with college
Throughout
kids.
the night? Are you supposed to be getting up and drinking at 2 in the morning, or?
Well, not a whole lot, but you got to be
Yeah.
when you're sleeping. Your body's still working. So when you get up, urinate or whatever it may be, you should be taking a big swig of water or Gatorade or whatever it may be. Pedialyte's a big thing now, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. Saw a lot of those with the guys. They're walking out into the into the stadium, and it's just little things like that. I'm not saying, and I point back to Kill all the time, but who knows? I just think they're well coached, they're well managed, they're organized, and you haven't had any issues operationally, at all, other than penalties here or there. But even some of the minute things like that, those aren't turning into issues like they did last year.
One other thing, and I'm going to direct this at Luke, because Luke, you were in the stands, we were in the press box, and maybe you've got some information. I think the thing that we talked about was the Virginia Tech crowd on the Vandy was pathetic. And I wondered, what would it be like for Alcorn State? Because it's a game they're supposed to win. Nobody's excited about seeing them. And yet at the same time, you've been so starved for excitement at Vanderbilt. And I get that it looks different when your stadium is 29 or 30,000 people. But I was surprised there were more people in the building Saturday than I would have thought for that game. I don't know what Vanderbilt did or didn't do, if it was just happenstance to get more people in the building than I would have thought. And look, the bar is set pretty low. You should have 30,000 of your people in the building for a game. Honestly, that's not a high bar to clear. But being realistic about where things are, I thought that was a big improvement for them. I don't know what efforts were made, if any, or if it just winning took care of it, Luke, but I thought that was interesting.
Well, I'll give you a little history on it. In the late 70s, when we were really poor and we were going through the 26-game SEC losing streak, they were giving away tickets on bunny bread. There used to be bread called bunny bread. I don't know if they still do or not. And you could buy a loaf of bread and get a ticket to the Vanderbilt game. That's got people in the game in the late 70s because no one was coming. Now, Saturday was a Chamber of Commerce weather day. That helps.
Yeah.
But tickets were cheap. And look, that performance, it just goes to show you people support winners. And it's that simple. If they played well against Virginia Tech. They got national recognition for it. So people wanted to come out and see. I saw more former football players Saturday than I've seen at any game at Vanderbilt, I think. And that's good. That's a great sign. I was excited about it, and I was glad for the kids to have a true home field advantage.
And Chris, I'll say this too. I don't know if you ever thought about this last year, but we cross over, like we pass up over the suite section, like the highest, of course, is where the TV guys are, and then our entrance into the press box is, I forget which level it is, but it's the second highest. And the third level down there is the suites, and in the elevator. There were a lot, I was full of an elevator with people that were in the suites, and they all walked out, and I kind of peek over into the suites. It looked pretty full. And that was something that never really happened last year. So to even see the suites full too is some affirmation in the north end zone as well. Chris, I think you had some people you knew over there, but that north end zone was full too. So I think winning helps everything as well. Like you said, the weather, Luke, but it's the combination of everything too, that, Nashville is it can be a fair weather town. I'm sure there's some people that have picked up the Titans in the Franklin era. They've picked up, seeing more Vandy shirts around town. Like, it's a combination of everything. So, but I noticed that suite section, Chris, was even more full and just active than it really ever was at any point last year.
Yeah. I want to get back to the premium seating in just a minute, but Luke, what was the reason there were more former players there? What went into that? Was there effort? I mean, that's encouraging.
I got to talk to Javon Marshall and George Smith the first game, and they said that's been ongoing before the season started, that it's been a focus. To me, and I'm not being critical here, that should be a focus
all the time.
And I think at times Vanderbilt, and I'm sure other schools are guilty of it too, you don't start something until we're a month from the season. We got to really focus on getting players back. Well, it's too late then.
Yeah.
We'll have to plan out their plans months in advance now. And, they did a good job. I'll be honest with you. It was I saw at least 50 football players
Nice.
That it was really good, and some basketball and baseball players too.
Yeah. I think they've got to start getting ahead of stuff with that. I mean, I still like, this is kind of funny. I don't know if this is how it happened. Everybody knows I do that SEC channel. We did a Miami, Florida preview a couple weeks ago, and I picked Florida to win the game stupidly. And I don't know if it was coincidental or what, but I've been getting, after every Miami game, I now get a text with the graphic asking me to contribute to their NIL. Which I find it hilarious. I don't know if, I don't think Vanderbilt's doing that same type of aggressive marketing just from anecdotal stuff I've heard. They've got it. I mean, hey, let's see them get ahead for something for a while, right? Take advantage of this. Get more of your people in the building. Get more, when you play South Carolina, outnumber South Carolina, get ahead of it. Finish the facility. Get your basketball stuff done. I mean, they still haven't broken ground on the indoor facility for football. What's stopping you? Is there a rule that says you can't work on both at the same time? I mean, it'd be a nice surprise if they would just get ahead of some stuff. I think they did some good things in the offseason, but I don't think they can stop and rest. They're still behind on NIL, I think, and some other things. And it would be nice to see them, for a change, kind of get out ahead of something. So I would encourage it, but I have seen some encouraging things. I'm gonna get to one more thing I wanted to mention in a minute, but Luke, I'll let you respond here.
Well, I remember Gordon Gee when he was at Vanderbilt. He said, if you don't see a crane on campus, then you're falling behind.
Yeah.
Kind of true. In today's markets, the way you have to do things and branding and everything else that has to go along with it, you better be adding on somehow. If you're not doing it with your fan base, then you better be doing it with buildings and facilities and that type of thing. So, yeah, you're right on that. They just got to stay. You got to keep your pedal to the metal or you fall behind real quick.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll add this too. You mentioned the cranes, Luke, and we know about all the construction. After the game, getting out of there for both games has been sort of a disaster. Now, for certain people, they're able to get out. Like if you parked in, I'm not sure how many fans are able to park in Kensington, but if you have to cut across in McGugin where that pathway for the players is, they're cutting that off. They're pausing that every 30 seconds because, if a player walks by, so be wary of that. It's taken us forever to get into the press conferences. Now we have learned an alternative route to go through Hawkins, and hopefully that'll solve that. Had to cut through Virginia Tech fans just to get to the press conference. So, but I can only imagine, I haven't heard very many complaints, but I've seen some that it could affect, those home games, whether it's Alabama, Texas, and even South Carolina down the stretch, especially Tennessee as well. I think there are still some things to think about there if they want that to go smoothly.
I have a question for you guys. The elevator, has it been working right after the game for you guys to go get down?
I've been taking the stairs. I don't take my chances.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we sat in the bridge, and both games the elevators have been not working, not operable.
Yeah. I guess I'll sum it this way. They've done some great things. The places I want to see them take a sense of urgency. And I feel like they're still in a habit of only doing it kind of when they're really pressed. Like Billy, you and I got the facilities tour, which wasn't really much of a tour. All we saw was the outdoor seating area a couple of days before this. And I think you and Joe and I were like, are they going to be done with this by Saturday? And like, there must have been
admitted that.
Yeah. 50, 60 guys there working the day we were there. And you watch a construction cam all summer and you see like a half dozen guys just kind of, putting around doing this and that. I'm like, why didn't you apply that same sense of urgency earlier in the summer to where you push? I mean, the wall still isn't done on that side of the facility. The basketball facility was supposed to be done. They were supposed to be playing it already. They're not. They've still, that's the one thing. They've done a lot of good things, but they've got to get over that thing of, all right, we'll ramp up the sense of urgency when it's needed. No, you get ahead of stuff. Get the indoor facility started, get that done ahead of time. Have your, don't be putting the finishing touches on the new building next year the day before the game. Get out ahead of it for a change. And you've got some excitement and some enthusiasm. And so I think the asks come a little easier. I would just like to see them make that flip, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, and you're also taking a risk when you work that way, because if you happen to have 2 or 3 really bad weather days, you're in trouble. So they got lucky with that part of it. But yeah, it's the same old thing. You got to keep your foot on the gas. If you slow up, or you take some time off, or you try to cut corners or save some money here or there, no, it won't work.
Yeah. That was my concern too. That if they had torrential downpours right before the start of the season for 2 or 3 days, I don't know how they would have.
I don't want to know what.
That. But I'll tell you this: what's done. My wife and my 2 kids got free tickets on the front row underneath the new section. In fact, got high-fived by Diego Pavia after a score. The kids, I mean, they love my daughter, who's 13 and is not happy about anything ever right now, was sending me texts during the game like, please tell mom, don't make us, because we're 8 o'clock church people. And I mean, it is talk about a hassle getting 2 kids out of bed early for that. It's a war. But my daughter's texting me during the game, tell mom we don't want to leave early. We want to stay for the whole thing. I mean, they're having a blast down there. Now, the part of that, I'm sure, was the free food that comes with it. That never hurts. But they were all just telling me after the game, even my wife, like, man, we had such a good time. We can't wait to go back if we get to do that again. So that part of things is going really well. And it is cool during the game to look down there and just see that and just think, man, they've never had anything like that. But I think, at least from what my wife and kids felt, like they had a blast being down there. And you are right on top of it when you were in those first few seats.
Yeah, that's something, like you said, Chris, Vanderbilt hasn't had. They haven't been able to tout. Now, whether it's a Vanderbilt fan or a road fan, obviously you'd like it to be Vanderbilt fans, but, it's an attraction. Vanderbilt Stadium, that north end zone so far is something fun and cool to do. You got to spend some money, of course, but, and like the view is worth it. Mention the food and it's cool. Suites are cool. People want to be in them, and the south end zone is going to be awesome too. So, for the first time in a long time, I think there's a draw, whether it's on the field, but also the facility itself is a draw, which, hasn't been the case in history.
You know what they need? They need focus. They need focus. Do you know how to get focus? I discovered how to get focus this summer, and it's a product called Magic Mind. The nice folks at Magic Mind reached out to me and asked if I want to sample their product this summer, which I did. It is designed to help with focus, and guess what? It has helped me do that. It is a mental performance shot that keeps you clear and motivated. It reduces stress. It has helped me gain a clear head and much needed focus throughout some stressful and hectic days this spring and summer. It is not a coffee replacement. There are no quick fixes, but it's an addition to your morning routine with time-release caffeine. If you like the scientific explanation for why it works, here that is. It is completely safe with 12 all-natural ingredients to support your body's energy engine. It's got mushroom nootropics and adaptogens, plus over 100% of your daily vitamin C and D in every bottle. It has been doctor validated with over 200 scientific studies behind every ingredient. Magic Mind donates 5 cents of every bottle sold to mental health charities that help U.S. homeless communities. It is so confident it can help you that it will refund your money 100%, no questions asked. If you don't like it, please check out Magic Mind. Help the folks who help us out. You can get 48% off a subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase with code VandySports20 at checkout. I think it's Magic Mind /VandySports, but I'll have Billy put the link in the episode notes, both on YouTube and on our podcast feed. Anyway, check that out. Use that promo code and check out Magic Mind, where flow state awaits you. Billy, I think the mailbag is also awaiting us. But before we get there, any other thoughts to wrap up things on football or whatever's on your mind?
No, I mean, I think, we'll get into it, but this weekend, with the weather, Luke and I talked about it before we recorded. Hurricane Francine will have an impact Saturday night, and Vanderbilt's going to have to be laser focused, maybe this week more than ever so far. And Luke, for me, if you're affected by this weather and a new stadium this weekend, you're not mentally tough. I think this team is mentally tough, and I'm still interested though. I'm not, I'm not confident enough to say that this team will have no issue Saturday night. It's not going to be easy. Clark has said that, but I'm confident to say that this team will be well prepared, and I think I'll be confident enough to say that most weeks, if not every week.
Well, my only concern is third quarter. We have not played both games. We've played poorly in the third. Come out the second half. We've got to correct that. Saturday, like you said, the weather is going to be an equalizer. They do have artificial turf, so that helps a little bit. But the wind is what I'm concerned with. Mm. We have to throw the football. So we got to come out and do what we normally do. Hopefully get the ball first, take 7 minutes off the clock, and kick a field goal or score a touchdown. That's the formula for this team. Don't get behind. Don't go out of your mind and get away from who you are. As long as they stay and do that and don't turn the football over, we'll be in good shape most weeks.
Billy, I'll have you pull the mailbag. That is sponsored by our friends at Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. The longest-running sponsor at Vandy Sports. I think they've been with us for a decade now, which is incredible and amazing. They are incredible and amazing people. I hope you don't ever have to use a personal injury attorney, but if you do, they're good at their job and just really good and high integrity people. So be sure to thank them for their support of our show. Also, thanks to John Levin, good friend of the show. Wobble Bond Dickinson is his company. He thanks the student athletes at Vanderbilt University for their dedication, effort, and hard work. Guest line presented by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-line packaging automation. They are also a supporter of our show. So, again, thank the people who help us out here. Billy, what is in the mailbag?
All right, third quarter of the podcast. Here we go. We got to perform, like Luke said. Colombiano Door kicks it off. Does Tristan Brown get some reps with the first team this weekend? I think that's a really good question, and I think a poignant one, a very well-timed one, because that catch on Saturday was really impressive. And I looked at Joey after that. I said, did he catch that with one hand? And we watched the replay. Yes, he did. So Tristan Brown is a talent. We talked him up. I thought McVay was a guy that made maybe a few more plays in fall camp, but Brown, we've seen here is a gamer. It was Alcorn State, but first team reps, not sure, Luke, but he is listed right behind Skinner there, ahead of Darian Wiley on the depth chart, which I thought was interesting. So he's a player, and if he keeps making catches like that, he may start getting more first team reps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's still going to be Quincy Skinner and Cheryl more than anybody. And if the game's close, you're going to see them in there most of the time. However, I hope it's like the Alcorn game where you can roll all these guys in and get them some more reps, because there's some talented kids. They just need an opportunity.
Yeah, I think you got to sort of put receivers and tight ends in the same bundle in this offense. And I think you've got Cheryl and Skinner have proven different things. I think everybody knows what we think of Cole Spence, and Stowers has proven some things. Have I seen enough from Tristan Brown to break into a top four to where you take a tight end off the field and go with three receivers? No, I haven't. But again, I haven't seen practice the last 3 weeks. And sometimes kids make a jump there. That feels a little premature to me, but you make a few more catches like he made Saturday, and that might become a conversation.
Another one from Colombiano Door. You mentioned Cole Spence, Chris. Is Cole Spence a transfer risk if tight end keeps getting underutilized? Well, that last part of that they're not going to keep getting underutilized. There's going to become games and times in games where they're going to have to get Spence the ball. They're going to have to find Stowers. Cam Johnson. What did Cam Johnson play against Alcorn? I haven't noticed much of Cam Johnson, which is really strange. But again, he's another guy that, is a good player. It just hasn't gotten utilized. If the tight end position continues to be underutilized, yes, I think Cole Spence is a transfer risk, but he's also just a really good player. I mean, he's going to be a transfer risk in general. There's some more players having transfer risks, I think, is a good thing. Now you got to find a way to keep them in your program. That's what they weren't able to do last year. But Luke, yeah, he's a great player. He's from Georgia. I wouldn't be surprised if a school, if after a good year like Georgia Tech or something like that starts come calling. But Vanderbilt, I think they've got a foundation here to be able to keep him. But again, you never know. So, but I do think they've got to find a way to utilize him to maybe counteract that a little bit.
Well, everybody in this day and age is a transfer risk.
Yep.
I don't look at individual players as being, Cole Spence made some comments in a post-game interview that winning is fun. He didn't care if he caught any balls or not. Now, part of that's not true, but at the same time, yeah, when he has satisfaction about making the key block. And he said when he sees a running back out of his peripheral vision go by him for a touchdown or a big gain, that he gets just as much satisfaction out of that as he does catching a football. So, I think Cole's a team player, and as long as we're winning, he'll be fine.
Yeah, Luke took the words out of my mouth. Everybody's a transfer risk everywhere unless you just are out of eligibility. So to speak specifically to that would be unfair. I don't know of any reason to think he is. But look, we were at practice. We saw what he did. We saw what he did before he got hurt. If I can see that, I guarantee you the coaches can figure it out. Now, am I surprised? Like I said, I would have bet the farm he had more than one target before now, and it hasn't panned out. So maybe he's not as big a part. The offense, it turns out in the end, maybe it's a rapport thing with the quarterback, because in fall camp, they are getting reps with different quarterbacks. I didn't sit and log every throw and say, is Drew Dickey targeting Spence 80% of the time and Pavia targets him 10% of the time? I don't know what those numbers would have been, but he's a talent. And this is not an offense that it wasn't coming out its ears with SEC caliber targets like the other schools in the conference. I think that this is probably going to be a water meets its own level by the end of the season. I'll be surprised if he's not targeted a lot more than he's been.
Let me add one more thing. When we get into the thick of the SEC and there's going to be games where our receivers can't get separation, then you're going to get the balls going out to the flat, to the running backs, and to the tight ends.
Safety valve. Colombiano.
Oh, he's more than a safety valve. He's a downfield threat if it works. But I know what you mean.
Yeah. Like Luke said, can be if you have to. Another one from Colombiano Door. What are some things you'd like the team to put into practice against Georgia State on Saturday to get them ready for Missouri? That's a good one. Offensively, just getting the downfield passing game more involved. I thought against Alcorn, there were a few times where Pavia would get out of the pocket and just wouldn't be able to find a receiver. And I guess credit to Alcorn. But, I think when he scrambles, there should be a guy open or two. Like a lot of that's kind of the point of him scrambling is, okay, he cuts left, steps up in the pocket, cuts right. All of a sudden, you've got an open receiver that wasn't open 2 seconds ago. So I think that takes time to develop. But it's also on the offensive lineman to find ways to maintain blocks for as long as he's scrambling. But I think the running game as well. I know I just mentioned the downfield passing game, but does Georgia State step up and find a way to stop the run after 2 weeks of watching film, through 2 weeks? And does Vanderbilt have an answer for that? Now, they've had an answer for just about everything, defensively, but, I think the offensive line continues to impress, but they've still got to get better. You're playing SEC front sevens here after this week, other than Ball State, and that's big boy ball. You're going to have to elevate. Can they elevate that? I think this week is a good proving ground for that. Can you go out and dominate Georgia State? But honestly, even more important than the run game for me, Luke, I think if they've got to get some other guy, they've got to get Sherrill and Skinner some more catches. I mean, they weren't heavily involved against Alcorn. I think they're going to have to do that in these SEC games because teams are going to load up and stop that running game. So Just getting those receivers more involved. I know we just talked about the tight ends, but I think they need to put into practice some of those intermediate passes that maybe we didn't see a ton of last week.
Yeah, I think that we're going to stay with what we've been doing. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of difference in what we've done the first 2 games. We'll take our shots, but again, the weather may be maybe a big factor. I don't know. And guys, this is something that you're probably going to think I'm silly to talk about, but we haven't seen how Diego does with a wet football. Yeah. I don't know if Diego has huge hands. It's a huge advantage, obviously, to have large hands. Handling the football as much as he does, in a wet situation, I'd like to see that. I'm sure they're doing wet ball drills this week. So I'm curious to see how he does that in those conditions.
Yeah, I'm guessing they didn't play in downpours in Las Cruces often. I don't know what the weather is out there, but that seems to be a deserty part of the country. That's a good point. I'll tell you my concern, and it's a positive, but they hadn't turned it over in 2 games. That feels like something that's bound to come down to earth a little bit, and tying that into mistakes. I think you just got to clean up the penalties and don't beat yourself. I feel like if they do that and play a reasonably disciplined and intelligent football game, I feel like they're the better team and they'll win. And I don't think, the point spread's 10.5. I think they could potentially win by more than that. No, a monsoon or something could be your wild card. But that aside, I feel like I feel like they're good enough to go down and win that game decisively if they just take care of their business and don't beat themselves.
All right, Pepperdor. Certainly Kill and Beck didn't show much against Alcorn. However, Georgia State represents a bigger threat. Obviously, game circumstances will heavily dictate this. But going into the game, what's your sense of short-term / long-term trade-offs between eating into the surprise factor against SEC defenses as opposed to just ensuring we win this game? And, Luke, I know you kind of hit in at that earlier. I'll let you take that one. It's interesting because, you got to win this football game, but you've got to win a couple SEC games down the road as well. How do you balance that?
Well, not to be redundant, but again, we've got to just keep doing what we're running the RPOs. So there's going to be options on every play. You got 4 options every time. You got the quarterback keep the pitch, throw it to the back in the flat, or throw it downfield. They just got to keep executing their plays. It's that simple. They're not going to do anything cute. And I think that Beck and Kill will approach it that way, that, hey, look, what we've done the first 2 weeks, let's just keep on keeping on. If we do that, we're going to be fine. As far as showing things and that type of thing, yeah, I'm like you guys. I'd like to see us go downfield a couple of times more just to loosen up the defense. But I don't think they want to have to do that. I think they want to keep those 6-7 minute drives going, move the chains, and stay with our identity.
Yeah, to some degree, they're not a team that's going to rely on, I don't know. Luke just said it. Their identity is hold the ball and then keep your defense off the field and finish drives. But look, let's be real. The 2-0 start has been fun. It's been encouraging. And ask Notre Dame. I'm sure Clark Lee will bring it up. You cannot afford to take anybody for granted right now, because all these things about bowl games and all the talk that people are talking about and getting excited about, guess what? You lose to Georgia State, and that's all probably off the table. You can't go into that game. Now, look, if you get ahead 30-0 at halftime, you can afford to maybe hold some things back in the second half unless it gets dicey. But don't put yourself in that spot to begin with by your own bridling back of whatever it is you need to win a football game.
All right, VA 72. Do we have gold jerseys and or gold pants? If so, wouldn't the gold jerseys be preferable to black on a hot, sunny day? Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I don't know that they have a gold jersey. Maybe they do, and we don't know yet. I know they have gold pants, which they could be wearing this weekend. Luke, when's the last time Vanderbilt wore a gold jersey?
I don't know. It's a good question. I guess when Mason was here. I'm not sure. Can't remember.
I don't even know. I mean, I don't even know, Chris, that they did during Mason, maybe Franklin, but either way, not sure if they have a gold jersey or not, but gold pants, I do know. Alcorn, it wasn't, that was not chilly, but that was cooler. We were in the press box with the window open, and I was telling Joe, man, I could use a quarter zip right now, a little pullover. We're just in a polo. So,
you're such a hypocrite.
soft,
You made fun of me for closing the window. Now you come out with the truth.
Hey, I stuck with it. I did call Chris soft for shutting the window, but no, I mean, I don't think Saturday night you needed to worry much about the jersey, and then Virginia Tech, we talked about that. Luke, I think you mentioned this, that some stipulations with when you're the home team, you can't wear all white, or I don't know what it was, but
it has to be agreed to by both teams. But here's the thing, though, guys. Saturday doesn't matter because it's going to be 70s and rain.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't matter what you wear.
Right.
Well, I want to ask you, Luke. You and you might know this. I mean, the fabrics now are so different. I mean, it's not like 1970, 1980 where you're wearing this heavy cotton or whatever they made jerseys out of, and it does soak in all the heat. I think even with the black fabrics, they probably have built things into where it's not so blasted hot.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That's really overblown. I'd much rather not have a black helmet on.
Yeah.
Because the heat more than the jersey does. The jersey, when you start sweating, they all get heavier anyway, so it doesn't really matter. A lot of times at halftime, we used to change the key guys' jerseys at halftime because they were soaking wet with sweat. It's kind of like a pitcher in baseball pitching in a hot game in Turner Field. Listen to me. In Atlanta, you go in and after 4 innings and change their jersey. Same thing at halftime. And when rain games, if the rain stops and you're sitting in a soaking jersey at halftime, you want to change Pavia's jersey.
There you go. G-Barks 24, speaking of Pavia, in order to preserve him for conference play, do you see Tim Beck incorporating some play action passes for this week's game, as well as plenty of carries for Alexander and Newberry? The concept of incorporating some play action passes, those are, that, like you said, Luke, that's within the offense. So, they don't have to incorporate that. That's, you said it, there's 4 reads basically with just about every play. Now there's certain plays where Pavia is lined up in the gun and it's a drop back pass play, but he'll also make checks. So, I mean, it's like having another coach on the field. So I don't think, in terms of incorporating some play action passes, that's built within the offense. In terms of plenty of carries for Alexander and Newberry, I think that's what could win them the game Saturday night. If you have big days from Alexander and Newberry's a guy in terms of straight line speed, maybe the faster than the two. Obviously, I think he's definitely faster than Alexander, maybe one of the fastest guys on the team. So he could have a big night, I think, especially if it's rainy late in the game. Georgia State has some tired guys defensively. Maybe Newberry makes an impact. But yeah, I think extended carries for those two guys, Luke, is something that they're going to have to utilize Saturday.
Well, moving forward, they're definitely going to have to, because he's been hit 40 times in the first 2 games. So that won't work. You can't do that as we move forward. So if the offensive line's doing its job, that first option of handing it off or pitching it will work.
Yeah, you guys covered that pretty well.
Yeah. All right, Theodore 8. It's the first road game of the year. Vegas has Vanderbilt as only a 9.5-point favorite. I think it's up to 10.5 now, which means this is a losable game. How much do you think this is a must-win game? It seems like one of those games where we don't get much credit for winning, but it's a disaster if we lose. I think you're dead on. This is a losable game for Vanderbilt. Georgia State has athletes. They're well coached. Del McGee was promoted after Sean Elliott left, pretty surprisingly, headed to South Carolina. Jim Chaney is he's kind of like Tim Beck, an older offensive coordinator. He's been at Georgia and Tennessee. They're going to have a plan to beat Vanderbilt. So again, I don't think it happens, but this is a losable game. It's not quite as losable as UNLV was. Now, going into UNLV, I think a lot of the talk was Vanderbilt should win this game, but it's losable. Turned out UNLV was better than we thought, and Vanderbilt was worse than we thought. But Vanderbilt is better and more talented than Georgia State. They're well coached. They're more well coached than they were last year, and Vanderbilt is. But that's dead on, Luke. I mean, this is a losable game. Georgia State beat Tennessee in 2019. I know they're not the same program, but they've got, I look at, you mentioned their transfers, Luke, 29 new guys. They got a lot of older guys that maybe were told by the previous staff, might want to check out a G5 school. Might want to go check out Georgia State, see your chances there. Well, they want to prove some of those people wrong and get back into the Power 5 and maybe prove they're an NFL player. So I think they'll have something to prove. Luke, they're at home, so Vandy's gonna have to strap up. It's not gonna be easy.
No, it's going to come down to us not turning the football over, which we haven't yet. Like Chris said, those things usually find their water level, and unfortunately, if we have this bad weather we talked about, it's going to be more difficult to play a clean game. But that's the thing: you get a scoop and score or a pick, a batted ball. Go back to the Virginia Tech game for us. What turned that momentum and got us really rolling was the Seabrooks interception.
Mm-hmm.
You get a play like that happen on a rainy day, and in Georgia State, where there's probably not going to be a whole lot of people there for the weather and other reasons, the kids could get a little bit on their heels. So as long as, again, just stay with what you're doing and keep doing what you've done the first 2 weeks, and everything will be fine. Yeah,
I agree with all that. I think if you flip sides, if I'm Del McGee, who's Georgia State's coach, I'm saying, hey, guys, we're a 10.5-point underdog in our building to Vanderbilt. We played Vanderbilt last year when I was at Georgia. We beat them, whatever. That's disrespect. I'm playing that card and getting my guys fired up. And I think, Luke, you said something that's key. You want to start strong. You don't want to give a team an opportunity, like a short field, a quick 7-0, to where they get some confidence and all those things, and maybe a little bit of doubt creeps in if you're Vandy. That's another thing. Vandy wasn't played from behind all year. So we don't know how they react. Well, we do a little bit. I say they haven't started playing from behind. They obviously did fall behind against Virginia Tech in the fourth quarter. We know that. So maybe we already know a little bit about how they respond. But I just wouldn't give Georgia State any early reason for some optimism and your own locker room some reasons for some doubt to creep in.
Yeah, Georgia State, they lost to Tech in week 1, 35-12, but they had some pretty long drives there that ended in field goals instead of touchdowns. So this is a program that you give them the chance, they can beat you. I mean, like we said, they're well coached. So, Vanderbilt's got to be ready to play. Denver Door, prior to the season starting, how much did the coaching staff pay you guys to dupe everyone and say the offense was uninspiring and would be a problem? Chris? How much did they pay you?
Say what you want about me. People don't always like my takes. One thing I think I've been, for better or worse or indifferent, is honest. That's what we saw. You guys saw the same thing. Now, there were some practices you weren't, that I wasn't at, that you were, but we had phone calls after a lot of those. And you weren't saying, man, the offense just lit them up today. I just think it was a case, and we said this was a possibility. There was a lot of change, a lot of new things, and camp is getting a lot of guys a lot of work. You always had to take that into account as a possibility that once everything got tightened up, it got better, which it did. But again, I'd also be lying if I told you I thought it would be running this smoothly at this point.
All right. Well, it tells you, Luke's talked about it. Fall camp, I'm not going to say it doesn't mean anything, but especially this year, it really didn't mean much. I mean, we were, and I don't want to say we were dead. We were wrong, because we were talking about what we saw. And, we weren't there the last week and a half leading up to the season. And so I'm sure they installed a few more things. And there's also times you forget where, we see 2 hours and then we leave. There's times off the practice field. There's meeting rooms. They can talk about things, those scrimmages, families were there. So, there was no reason for them to give away anything and give us a taste of what they were going to be. Now, I think we figured out throughout camp what they were going to look like, but there weren't many days where, man, the offense lit it up today, and they were the dominant side of the ball. Now, that's fall camp usually. Defense usually dominates, but I mean, I do feel somewhat stupid now at this point, talking the way we're talking about this offense now. But I did add, I remember telling this to Joey, last minute thoughts before the game against Virginia Tech. I kept thinking, it was nagging at me, Joey, I think there's a shot. There's an outside chance this offense comes out and looks nothing like what we expected and looks good because they're well coached. You got Pavia in there who's played a lot of football, and that happened. I mean, look, it looked totally different than what we perceived it to be through fall camp, which, which wasn't a surprise to a lot of, people within the building.
Let me defend you guys on this stuff. Here's the thing. When you're watching camp, the quarterback can't be hit. So you know what's going on in Pavia's head. Was it a 6-yard gain or a 20-yard gain? You don't know. I don't know. No one knows. He knows in his mind, okay, I didn't pitch it. I kept it there because I would have gotten the first down. So therefore, you're not seeing, maybe the passing game you can tell a little bit about, but we weren't seeing it because the quarterback can't get hit. And in that type of offense, you've got to be able to see you got to be able to see that to be able to judge it. So in you defense, in my defense somewhat, I don't, camp doesn't excite me one way or the other when it comes to that.
Now, here's the other side. We did say, hey, the defenses look pretty good. Now, that may be attributed to the fact that the offense is awful, but we did say it feels like they're going to be a little better on that side of the ball. We liked Fontenette. You saw Patterson come on last year. You got a healthy C.J. Taylor. You got Ricky right back. You got Dante Carter. You got more depth on the front line. We did say we think there's a chance the defense is going to be, significantly improved, but you just don't know till they play the games. And I think that part's held water pretty well through a couple of weeks.
Yeah, G-Barks 24. Is this the first year the defense has given the players the turnover cowboy hat and guitar after a pick or a fumble? If so, that's a great tradition. Vanderbilt should keep having its defensive players do that during games. Yes, that's the first year. And I don't know if they, in the previous 3 seasons, they've done anything like that. I don't think they have. Mm-mm. And, that's something that's easy to do. Get a guitar, get a cowboy hat. You're in Nashville, you're in the Music City. You can recruit to that. You can sell that. And it's fun. I mean, this program's having fun. There was no fun to be had last year. Year 2, there was some fun late in the season, but there's fun, there's confidence, and those two combined is swagger. And I think they're playing with some swagger that you quite frankly haven't seen this level of under Clark Lee. He said he's having more fun. He's learning how to enjoy, games, post-game celebrations. This is a different program, Chris. And I know you can say you've never seen a turnover cowboy hat and guitar after a turnover at Vanderbilt.
Luke, that feels like a Jerry Kill addition to me. I don't think that's something Clark came up with on his own.
No, look, I'm just glad we don't have like the turnover trash can.
That was funny.
That was awesome. All right. Ann Arbor Door. How good is Georgia State? Are they returning a lot of players, or did they upgrade their talent in the portal? They are not returning a lot of players. In terms of upgrading their talent, I'm not going to sit here and say they upgraded their talent, but they've got some talent. They've got a couple of good secondary players. Kenyatta Watson is one of their safeties. He transferred over from Texas. He had an interception against Georgia Tech in week 1. They do return an all Sun Belt player in cornerback Gavin Pringle. He had 4 interceptions last year. So their defense, I think, is the better side of the football. They got a transfer from Coastal, running back CJ Beasley, I think is his name, but he's been hurt. They've been handing the ball to Freddie Brock, who is a solid player. Christian Villar is the quarterback. He was at Colorado last year, didn't play much, but this year 448 yards, a few touchdowns, had 238 last week. So I don't know that they upgraded their talent. They were a bowl team last year. Brock, that running back, he had an incredible game last year in the bowl game. I think he had 276 yards in that bowl game against Utah State. So, they've got some dudes. I mean, they've got some talent at, not obviously to Vanderbilt's level, but I don't think it's all that far off. But again, they're not in a good spot right now. You have a head coach leave and Sean Elliott that late in a cycle, Luke, and that's a tough position. McGee's a good recruiter, and they've got good coaches. So they're just trying to build the foundation right now, I think is what I've heard a lot of. But how good are they? I don't think they're all that good. But again, they're still not a team to scoff at. They've got some players.
Again, they've got enough to beat you if you turn the football over and give them extra chances and extra possessions. Hurst and Brock, the running backs, are good. Dukes and Brock are both good. Ted Hurst is a really good receiver. Big kid, rangy, catches the ball well. You worry about him getting behind us maybe. Defensively, they got a couple of kids, Justin Abraham and Xavier Robinson. I saw them all over the place in the films that I watched on them. So they've got players, and they're older. As I mentioned, you got 29 transfers, 28. They haven't played together a long time. Similar to what Vanderbilt's got 53 new players. They've got a bunch of new ones too, but turnovers will be the difference. I'm telling you guys.
I keep a set of power rankings between about 5 mainstream places. Jeff Sagard's one, ESPN FPI is another. It's pretty good at predicting lines. And right now, Georgia State is 117th in these. The 3 teams in front of them: Utah State, Eastern Michigan, Southern Miss. 3 teams behind them: Western Michigan, Wyoming, and ULM. By the way, Ball State is 124 in that. Vanderbilt will see them later. Vandy, if you're wondering, is 65. Now, we'll say this. A lot of preseason expectation is still built into most of these. Some are better about adjusting for the game. So if it's just based on the season, Vandy would move up. I don't know what that would do to Georgia State. But, look, just for point of reference, if I'd been doing these a year ago, Vanderbilt probably went into the season, 105, 106, somewhere like that, I guess. So Georgia State probably a little worse than what Vanderbilt would have been to end last year. But, again, you don't take anything for granted. And it's also early. Could be a lot better than we know.
All right, we got a good last question to close it out here. B. Sheridan, 15. Does last year's Vandy team beat this year's Georgia State team more times than not? That's a tough one, because I think at this point in the season, you go back to last year, I don't know if the result against UNLV is that much different against this year's Georgia State team. You're going on the road. You take last year's team, where they were early in the season last year, and you ask them to go on the road to a stadium they've never been to before. It's going to rain. Swan, remember that offense. I mean, the line was not on a good spot. Interceptions were already an issue for A.J. Swan. I would not be confident in them going to Atlanta winning this game. Again, maybe they win it. Georgia State this year is not anywhere close to UNLV last year. That was a good, legit UNLV team. So maybe they still end up beating them, but it's definitely close. I mean, this would be kind of Luke, that Northern Illinois game from a couple of years back. I think that's probably what it would have been like, and maybe Vanderbilt pulls it out, but still, it felt like a challenge last year, that team going on the road and winning a game, much less winning a game at home too.
Well, that's what I've been talking about the whole thing. It's all turnovers. Last year's team turned the football over all the time. They would be behind, or get a punt blocked or fumble. You can't do that against anybody hardly. I mean, and if they do that Saturday, then Georgia State will give them trouble. But last year's team, I'd be very worried. And I guarantee you, if you had a line on last year's team against this team this year, it'd probably be a pick 'em.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. I disagree with you a little bit. I think this team is good enough to overcome maybe a -1 or -2, provided that's not a pick 6 in there or giving somebody the ball at the 5. I mean, like, if they're -4, then this is probably an unhappy podcast next week. But I think they're good enough to overcome a little bit of that. But I'm with you, Luke. That's exactly what I was thinking. I think if you play last year's Vandy against this year's Georgia State down there, it probably is a pick 'em. And that tells you a lot about how far Vanderbilt's come in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That's what I've got.
Enjoyed it, guys. Hopefully we have some more pleasant podcasts ahead. They're a lot more fun when the material is good. But anyway, thanks to you guys for joining me. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Thanks to our audience. If you would, hit the like button if you're watching this on YouTube. Give us a nice rating on the podcast feed. Tell a friend. And if you are looking to help out, we still don't have a football sponsor for this year, or just ancillary sponsors or whatever. We pay the bills around here out of a lot of sponsorships. So anything is appreciated. chrislee70@gmail.com if you want to have that conversation. For Billy Derrick, for Luke Wyatt, I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.